who might want to see it afterwards. So I've started the recording. I hope that's okay with everybody. And so without really any further ado, I'm really wanting to welcome Kem Luther and Andy MacKinnon, probably the foremost fungi experts, I was going to say in British Columbia, maybe far beyond that, but the wealth of knowledge and love of the beautiful coastal environment that we live in is huge with both of these guys, and it's going to be a pleasure to be with them. So I'm going to let them say more about themselves and their history, whatever they want to. Kem and Andy are going to start with a little intro first, and then we'll get to your questions. So it'll probably be about 25 minutes before we actually get to your questions. And the only other thing I want to remind you, it's in the chat box, is that the request was that you make a we or a larger than we donation if you're willing to the Machosen Foundation as sort of the price of entry to this event. And with no further ado, I'm going to hand it to Andy.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jackie. So my name's Andy MacKinnon. I've lived in Machosen for 32 and a half years now, and did my master's in fungi way back when. I've worked a lot with the South Vancouver Island Mycological Society. I'm the immediate past president of this society. And so I'm going to take 5 minutes or so to do a brief intro to mushrooms in Machosen. Let me see here. If we go to here, from here. So thanks very much for joining us for this event. Just a quick reminder, if you're out and about over the next couple of weeks, one of our very special seasonal treats in this part of the world is to search for the Christmas tuberia, which is a beautiful wine red mushroom, maybe 4 to 8 centimeters tall, that is one of BC's rarest mushrooms, and fruits in the rotting and or burnt wood at the base of big old arbutuses. So if you're out and about and you see some big old arbutus around and it's got a bit of rot or a burned area at the base, have a look. And if you find this mushroom, you found one of BC's rarest and most beautiful mushrooms, called the Christmas tuberia, because it fruits around Christmas time. And we saw it a couple of weeks ago. Keep your eyes open, let us know. When we talk about mushrooms tonight, and in a mushroom guide, we're going to tell you about it a little bit. We're talking about a lot more than just fleshy things with caps and stems. So we're going to talk about everything from crusts and bird's nest fungi to coral fungi, puffballs, boletes, polypores, and gilled mushrooms. And so any questions or discussion you want to have about any of these groups, we would love to join the discussion tonight. Just a quick reminder that all of these different fungi we're talking about here are the fruiting bodies of fungi that grow in the wood or in the ground. And the way they make more mushrooms is to produce these fruiting bodies, to produce all these different things. What this means is that they're there year round. If you have a favorite patch for a particular mushroom, you can probably come back the next year and expect to find it there again, because the fungus is there year round. We're only really aware of it when it's producing these fruiting bodies that we call mushrooms. But they're critical in the ecology of the fields and forests of Machosen and globally. And I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that without a lot of these fungi, we would not have trees and forests in Machosen. And we can talk some more about that later if people are interested. How many species of mushrooms? In BC, we have more than 3,400 species. So that's more than the number of species we have, say, of vascular plants, or way more than vertebrate animals. So they're a really important component of the species diversity in British Columbia. In Metchosin, so far, we have found more than 480 species. We've of fungi, of mushrooms. We have organized myco-blitzes each of the last 7 years. These are really fun public events. I know a lot of you have participated in them. When I say we, I mean the Metchosin Biodiversity Project, which is myself and Kem and various other people. We have lots of mushrooms in British Columbia, more types of mushrooms than any other province or territory in Canada. And we have many species of mushrooms in Metchosin as well, because we have lots of different types of ecosystems. So if you have climatic diversity and ecosystem diversity, you tend to get species diversity. BC has more climatic diversity, more ecological diversity than any other province or territory. So it's not surprising that we have so much species diversity. The other thing you have to do to maintain species diversity in an area like Metchosin is you have to maintain a lot of area of suitable habitat for these fungi. And I only mention that, well, I mention that because I love Metchosin, and I think we've done a better job of maintaining a lot of these habitats than some other CRD municipalities, but also because that's part of the work that the Metchosin Foundation does. They talk about maintaining habitat for the people of Metchosin and for the species in Metchosin, but the real reason you do it is to maintain mushroom habitat. And that's one of the reasons why we're so happy to support Metchosin Foundation tonight. So this year, much was disrupted, and you can find out more about this project here in a January article in the Metchosin Muse written by Kem Luther. But Kem set up a sort of virtual myco-blitz using iNaturalist in Metchosin this year. So we had a Metchosin myco-blitz 2020. It just wasn't the big public event that we've had in past years, but more of a virtual myco-blitz. From the beginning of September until December 9th, we recorded 561 observations from 44 different observers, and that represented 230 different species, which is more than we usually find in one of our large public involvement myco-blitzes. We also found a number of species that we haven't found before, and this is very consistent with a lot of areas. One thing I did want to mention here, we have more than 480 species of mushrooms recorded from Metchosin. That's the second highest number of any community in British Columbia after Whistler. And I'm not certain, but it may very well be the second highest number of any community in Canada. So while we have a lot more species out to discover in Metchosin, we know a lot more about them than most other places. So here's a map showing the locations of fungal observations from our Metchosin myco-blitz 2020. And then finally, just to let you know that there is a new book coming out in summer, sometime in summer of 2021, if all goes well, on mushrooms of British Columbia. It'll be 480 pages long and full of color photos. It'll be a handbook in the Royal British Columbia Museum Handbook series. And Kem has posted to the chat section of our Zoom call tonight the pre-order page for anybody who's interested in pre-ordering it. But keep in mind that while you can pre-order it now, it's not going to be available until late summer 2021 at the earliest. So that's just a brief introduction to mushrooms of Machosen.
I thought maybe I would show people the page on iNaturalist where we've been recording the mycoblitz results. Just take a sec here.
Thank you for that, Bandy. I love that visual of the life cycle of the mushroom too. That's great. Is that in your book?
Not that particular one is not in our book, but we certainly have an illustration of the life cycle of mushrooms. Absolutely.
So are you seeing now the iNaturalist page?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so this is the iNaturalist is a place where you can on the web where you can go and you can go out and take pictures with your smartphone usually or your tablet, and it will record it and the GPS location, and it will allow you to identify what you saw. Other people will jump on and confirm your identification or reject your identification. I mean, there are hundreds of millions of observations on iNaturalist, and we use it in the Machosen biodiversity work. So what we did this year is we adapted it specifically for the mycoblitz. We set this up to run for the 2.5-month period, and anybody who made an observation of fungi or lichen within the bounds of Machosen in that period, you see them on this map. So you can go to this map and you can click on something. Here's somebody who said, I spotted Agaricus hondensis. So if we click on it, we discover that somebody named Bill Weir submitted this. Hi, Bill. He's here with us. He identified it as Agaricus hondensis. Nobody's confirmed it yet. And we can go back, look at some of the other observations. I know the bunch down here were made by Morris. So here's pseudo-hidden element. He took a picture of it. He identified it. Nobody's confirmed it yet. Somebody said probably correct, but we need a better picture. So that's what we collected this year. And the ones that seem to us to be fairly certain identifications, we added them to the Machosen biodiversity database. So any questions on this, how it works? I'm hoping that we'll keep this going next year as well, even though we may run public events in parallel with it. I'm hoping this will encourage a lot of you to get out and start taking pictures. Even if you're not good at identifying mushrooms, if you can just get good pictures, we'll have a location. If the picture is good, people will identify it for you. Any questions on that?
Yeah, you have to unmute yourself if you have a question.
Hi, Cam, it's Christian here. The question is, what is a good picture?
Well, you want to have multiple pictures if possible. And for mushrooms, get a picture as close as possible to the top and side, and then pick up one of the specimens and turn it over and take a picture of the gills as well. So that's really what we need to identify it. And then in the notes section, any observations you can make, what kind of tree it was growing around would help us, what kind of environment it was, what kind of smell it had, because obviously you can't get that from a picture. That would all help us be certain about the identification.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're back.
Great. Thank you, Kim. I think you were going to show a video too, or was this a video?
Yeah, okay. No, let's do that now. So it's one interesting thing is how long the mushroom season has been this year. It usually starts here on the southern end of the island at the beginning of October, and mostly it's pretty much over by the middle of November. And one of the reasons it's over is because heavy frosts, freezing comes along. That's what puts the mush in mushroom, right? everything turns to jelly and there's not much to see out there. But this year, the ground's not frozen yet and we're still getting mushrooms coming up. And so what I did is I took my camera and went out to Machosin Wilderness Park 3 days ago to see what was still around.
Closer, you're happy.
And certain mushrooms come up later in the season, and these are later season mushrooms. And I thought we could just take a look at these tonight because you can still go out there and see some of these if you'd like. So I took little videos of them, and I'll show the video and I'll pause, and perhaps Andy or some of you might have some comments on them. So let me share my screen here. Share screen. Here we go. Optimize for video clip. Okay, you're seeing that now?
Yep.
All right, so here we go. There's no sound to this. It's a silent movie. Okay, so here I am in Machosin Wilderness Park and I spot something on the ground. So I'm going down to get a closer look. I'm going to pick this one so you can see it. And this one is, okay, no, I don't see a label on it, but you see what I just did to the stem? I broke the stem so that you could see how it breaks. And that's fairly significant in identifying this one. So this particular mushroom is a russula. And breaking the stem is a way of telling it's a russula because a russula stem, when you break it, breaks like a piece of chalk. And the top of this mushroom, if you notice, is somewhat slimy and it's white. And if you taste a little bit of it, it's super hot. It's like putting a hot pepper in your mouth. And if you look at the top, not only do you see white, but you'll see little shades of purple here and there. And when you put all of that together, that's a clue that you probably have Russula stunsii. And in fact, that's a mushroom that comes up quite late in the season. And in this walk, I must have seen 100 of these. Andy, do you have any comments on this?
Well, Russula is one of the most common genera of large mushrooms you'll run into in the woods. It's one of the easiest to identify to genus. That's the Russula part of the name. And Russulas are one of the more difficult genera to identify to species because the naming, the taxonomic, the taxonomy is a nightmare, and the individual species can be quite variable. So this is a nice distinctive one. It's all over Eleanor Man too. There's lots of it out there right now. But there are an awful lot of russulas that are very difficult to identify as species. They are like almost all large mushrooms in Machosin, the fruiting bodies of fungi growing attached to the trees in the forest. And without the trees, the fungi wouldn't be there, but without the fungi, the trees wouldn't be there either.
And maybe Andy and Kim, if you could speak to whether, if you know this, whether they're edible, because people will probably ask that question, I would imagine.
Well, there's one russula that people do commonly pick to eat. It's called the shrimp russula. It probably isn't out much right now. It comes a little earlier in the season. The rest of the russulas, they're not poisonous as a group. And in fact, in Eastern Europe, they pick them almost indiscriminately, and then they just pickle them. And I've eaten some of these Eastern European pickled mushrooms, and they taste like pickles and salt. I mean, like vinegar and salt, right? I mean, they just take up the taste of the pickling. But for the most part, especially the ones that are hot tasting, they're not picked to eat around here. Andy and I had a friend who did her PhD on russulas. Her name is Anna Bazzacalupo. And we used to joke when she started out, she could identify the russulas for us. By the time she finished her PhD, she could hardly identify anything because she discovered in doing this through doing DNA work with it, genetic studies, that most of the clues we use to identify russulas don't identify russulas, specific ones.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'll go on here to the next one. I'm walking a little further, and now I've found a big log that it looks like an alder log. It's been down for quite a while, and there's some mushrooms growing on the side. I'll pick one of these and flip it over, look at it. This one is, I have the name right there. It's Sarcomyxa serratina. Some people know it as Panella serratina. It's the winter oyster mushroom. And it's a late mushroom. It looks a bit like a regular oyster mushroom, which is a pleurotus mushroom, but it has a very slimy top, and its base often has this yellow. It isn't edible. I don't know many people. Do you know many people who pick this specifically to eat, Andy?
I don't, Cam, and I know some people who don't like the taste of it.
Yeah, it's sometimes bitter, and we don't know why. I tasted this particular one on the day I took this, and it wasn't bitter, but I have tasted them before, and you get a bitter taste in your mouth, and I assume that carries over in the cooking. But you'll often see these growing on hardwoods in abundance, slimy tops. It's the winter oyster. And interestingly, they often grow where the other oyster grew earlier in the season. The mycelium of both mushrooms is inhabiting the same log. Okay. And right next to the winter oysters, I found these along the log. And here's one I picked. And this is called a turkey tail. It's Trametes versicolor, turkey tail. And when you turn it over and look on the bottom, you'll see small holes. This is a polypore. It's a mushroom that instead of having gills, it has holes in the bottom, and the spores are formed up in these little tubes and fall down through the tubes. This looks a lot like another mushroom we call sterium, but the difference is with a sterium, when you turn it over, you don't see any pores. This one you do, and it's a good way. And sometimes a whole log can be covered with this Trametes versicolor, the turkey tail.
It's not an edible mushroom. It's too tough for that, but it's one of the more commonly gathered medicinal mushrooms in British Columbia, used for boosting the immune system and also for treating certain types of cancers. And it's very common, very abundant in Metchosin.
Andy and I have a friend named Larry Evans who travels all over the West Coast, going to different mushroom groups, mushroom events. And when he comes by and you go out with him in the woods, if he sees a fresh one of these, he will take it and chew it like chewing gum. Yeah, but I'm not sure I'd recommend that practice, but he thinks it keeps him healthy.
Can I just ask a quick question about that? When it's used for medicinal, then it would be harvested and then dried and ground up into a powder? Would that be
Yeah.
the way?
Normally, that's what you would do. You would make a sort of tea out of it. You wouldn't just eat it raw like Larry did.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it was Bristol Foster who taught me to pick up some and chew it or use it as snooze as you walked along the trail, and I do that also.
Larry, one of the interesting things about Larry is he's kind of mushroom crazy, and he likes to extend the season. So what he used to do, I don't know if he still does it, is he would get in his, he would do in the spring, he would take some crews out to harvest morels in Montana, and he'd make enough money that he could buy the gas to drive his old car up to Alaska on the highway going up there. And the mushroom season in Alaska starts in June, And then he would just work his way down the coast, and he'd get to BC, southern BC, somewhere in October when our mushroom season started. And then from here, he'd work his way on down to Washington, and then Oregon, and then California. And the mushroom season in Los Angeles starts about January. And then he would get on a plane and fly down to Costa Rica for the beginning of their mushroom season. And that would take him back to the spring when he'd go back and do the morels. So if you think Andy's crazy about mushrooms, you should be around this guy. Okay, so we're moving on now. Here's a mushroom that I found, a very small one. And the interesting thing about this one is when you pick it up and smell it, it smells like bubble gum. And in fact, its name is Aphroditeolida. Its English name is the pink bubblegum mushroom. And I just smelled it right there. It's a very small hygrophorous mushroom. And I've seen it twice this year. Usually I see it about once a year. Do you see it much, Andy?
About that number of times, I think, Kem. But it's a very distinctive mushroom. The cap shape is very distinctive, the color, and especially the smell. And if you hunt mushrooms long enough, you'll find this one and you'll smell it, and you'll swear you're smelling a little stick of double bubble gum. It's a remarkable resemblance.
In fact, many mushrooms have distinct smells. Okay, and now I was walking along and just saw on the forest floor a coral mushroom. We call them coral mushrooms because they look a bit like sea coral. And this one is called Clavulina coralloides. Its other name is the crested coral, and it grows in small clumps like this. Normally, these aren't harvested for food, but they're just beautiful to find on the forest floor. And the spores on this mushroom are borne all around the outside of the mushroom. All the white skin you see there, that's almost all spore-bearing surface.
There are lots of different species of coral fungi that grow in the forests in Metchosin, and they come in a rainbow of colors. And a lot of them are very difficult to identify, requiring microscopic examination and chemical tests. But the crested white coral is one that's a little more straightforward.
Okay. There was a large patch of these mushrooms. They're Clatosabe gibba, or gibba, and notice that on this one, the gills, where they come into the stem, they go down the stem. This is called decurrent, and it helps to identify certain mushrooms. And this one, it has this sort of pink cinnamon color, and it has a very interesting smell. This is one of those mushrooms that has a distinct smell, but I can't tell you what it is because it's distinct. I can't say smells like, and then you would immediately know what it smelled like, because nothing smells quite like it. It's a very pleasant smell, and this is in fact an edible mushroom. And over the last 15 years, I've probably eaten about 30 different kinds of mushrooms, just for the fun of eating them. I didn't like all of them. Many of them I'd never eat again. I always, of course, made sure I knew what it was before I ate it. And in a couple of cases, I've gotten an upset stomach from these that the books say are edible. And this is one which the books say is edible. So I had never eaten it. So I took it home, cooked it up, tried it. It didn't give me a stomach ache. The books are right on this one for me, but there are other mushrooms that the books say are edible that are not edible for me. So that's another reason to be careful when you're eating mushrooms, even if you know exactly what they are. many of these are new foods to people, and your system may not be adapted to digesting them.
Very much like cilantro. The books say it's edible, but it actually tastes like soap.
What tastes like soap?
Cilantro.
Cilantro.
Different
Yeah.
strokes for different folks, eh?
Anyway, carry on.
Okay. Here's another, the same thing. This is that Clatosobi gibba. I'm just looking at the bottoms of them here. And here's a mushroom I found. It was a huge mushroom, and so I pulled it up to look at it. And it turns out this is a Cortinarius, but Cortinariuses can be very hard to identify. There are about 1,000 different Cortinariuses, and what they have in common is when they're young, they have this web-like, cobwebby-like veil that protects the gills, and when the gills expand, that web breaks and usually ends up on the stem, but it's just cobwebby, so you can't really see it. But when this thing starts dropping its spores, which are dark, kind of a chocolate brown, red brown, the spores stick to the veil material. And so you can see it there on the very top. It's the remnants of the cortina. And it's one of the ways you know this is a Cortinarius. But to identify them much further is, especially on an older specimen like this, is difficult.
There are, I said there were, we have recorded more than 3,400 species of fungi in British Columbia. There may, nobody knows for sure, but there may be twice that many or more. And a lot of them are undescribed species, that is, they're new to science. So I think you could say with some certainty that there are undescribed species of Cortinarius in Machosen.
I think that would be a safe thing to say.
Yeah. So if you're feeling badly about not being able to put a name to a mushroom sometimes, that's the sort of thing you might want to keep in mind.
Now, I didn't walk very far from here into a wetter area, and I found a good edible. This is the winter chanterelle, also Craterellus tubiformis. It's also known as yellow leg because it has a yellow base to it. But like all chanterelles, it is instead of gills, it has these things we call veins underneath. They're not true gills. It's fairly easy to learn to recognize this one, and there are people who think that this is the best tasting chanterelle there is. Unfortunately, it's always quite small, and so if you're picking them, you usually have to pick dozens of them to make one meal. Have you eaten it, Andy?
Oh, I love this mushroom. I think this is an extraordinary tasty mushroom, and it's one you can get right through January or February on the west coast of the island, and some places here as well. So when everything else is gone, there's always still winter chanterelle, and it's absolutely delicious.
Yeah.
And did they grow from the trees directly?
The fungi are attached to the roots of trees, yes. And they derive nutrition from the trees and deliver water and minerals to the trees. And it's a much more complex and interesting story than that. But yes, you won't find these where there aren't trees.
I wanted to show you the top of this one too. This one is, it has a depressed cap, almost funnel shaped. It has a very deep depression right in the middle, a hole in some cases that goes all the way through to the stem. It's fairly easy to learn to recognize. This one, there were a lot of these out there. This is Cystoderma phalanx. It's a beautiful little mushroom. It's the sheathed powder cap. And this mushroom has a ring. If you look, you see that ring on the stem? That ring is a result of a protective veil that covered the gills when it was young. And when the mushroom opened up, it broke, but the veil broke, but it didn't disappear. A remnant of it stayed on the stem of the mushroom, and that becomes the ring. There are 3 different kinds of cystodermas you find in the field, and this one's easy to recognize because it has this huge ring. And then I found a log, and this is a conifer log, and on the log is a jelly mushroom. This is Dacromyces chrysospermus. You see how it shakes like jelly? Let's back up a bit. It's bright yellow, and its common name is witch's butter. Almost all jelly mushrooms are edible, but they're all tasteless. And this one I'm picking up to look at the base, and I didn't get a very good look at the base. Any comments on that, Andy?
No, I think you covered it well.
Okay. Okay, and there were a bunch of these in the woods, and this is fir flamecap. It's a beautiful mushroom. It has this nice dark, red-brown look, and underneath it has the yellowish gills. It's Gymnotus saponaeus, the fir flamecap. It's a probably poisonous mushroom. And it almost always grows out of wood. So the base of it will always be crooked because it'll start growing out sideways, and then it'll turn and grow up because it has to be growing vertically when it opens its gills. So the gills point straight down so the mushrooms, when the spores, when they come out of the gills, will fall straight down and catch the air.
Now, Kim said that mushroom was probably poisonous. There's a small number of mushrooms which are absolutely delicious. There's a small number of mushrooms that are deadly poisonous. There's actually a few mushrooms which are absolutely delicious and deadly poisonous. The death cap is apparently an absolutely delicious mushroom before you die. And then there's most mushrooms which are not deadly poisonous, but not really tasty either. It's very similar to plants, say, where there are a small number of really tasty plants and a small number of really poisonous plants. And then there's species like this fir flamecap, which is probably poisonous, but we're not really sure. So if anybody joining us on the Zoom call tonight wants to eat a bunch of them and report back, then we'll have a better idea of just how poisonous it is.
Please don't pay any attention to Andy.
But please, before you do that, make your donation to the Machosen Foundation.
And have your wheel in order. Yeah. Okay. Now what's this little mushroom poking up? Here it is. This is one of the things I actually went out to look for. This is a mushroom, which is one of the tastiest mushrooms ever. This is a little thing called a hedgehog, Hydrum umbilicatum. And it's what I call a safe edible. And it's a safe edible in the sense that even a beginner can learn to recognize this. If it has this beautiful chanterelle-like golden color, and then you turn it over and look underneath, and you see, instead of gills, these little teeth, the little spines, little teeth. And that's the spore-bearing body. The spore-bearing Basidiomyces, basidia are all around the teeth. And it's very easy to recognize this mushroom. And it's a late mushroom. It's coming out right now. And you'll find it just about everywhere. Unfortunately, you don't find huge flows of these things. You find one here, one there. And so you sort of have to pick them as you find them. And if you're lucky, by the end of the day, you may end up with a meal. But you may not. You may end up with just one mushroom too. Andy, do you have anything you want to say about that?
I agree. A delicious meal, one of our best edibles. And there are a number of spots around the chosen to find them, but I won't tell you about any of them. And Bill will know more spots than I do, for sure.
Yeah. If you're having trouble finding these, just follow Bill and his 2 dogs, and he'll lead you right to them. Just sort of hide behind the trees so he doesn't see you. Okay. What have I found here? Okay, there's a little mushroom growing in the duff. And this is an example of a mushroom, of a group of mushrooms that are quite common. They're fiber heads or anosebes. This one is Anosebe albodiscus. Now, many of these fiber heads can be hard to identify right down to species. This one isn't. It's one of the simplest anosebes to identify because of its top. It's albodisca means white disc, right? White circle. And that's exactly what it has. It has that little white center. Most of the other fiber heads out there, it can be a little tricky to identify. The most common one is Anosebe geophila. All of these anosebes are poisonous. However, very few humans are poisoned by them because they're too small. So people don't even think about picking them to eat. But what they do poison are pets. This is probably one of the most common poisoners of dogs.
The anosebes are also very well known for their smells, which range from musty and funky through to very commonly described as spermatic. And the resemblance can be quite extraordinary, so I'm told.
Yeah. Okay. And here's one on the hillside, and this one's out. I just saw this one today. I took a walk just down the road, and this is Lacaria laccata, the lackluster Lacaria. It's kind of a medium-sized mushroom, and it's an edible. It has a very sweet smell and a very sweet taste. I don't care for this mushroom because it's too sweet to eat. In my opinion, it just doesn't go along with being a mushroom. But it's a little tricky sometimes to identify. This is one that has many different forms, and you sort of have to learn it 2 or 3 times before you get it. It has very widely spaced gills. And I'm looking at the base here because there's 3 different Lacarias. There's this lackluster Lacaria, and then there's one that is a beautiful amethyst color. And then there's one that's in between. But see the widely spaced gills and the ridges on the stem. When you get the hang of it, though, it's pretty easy to know it when you see it.
I think it's one of our more variable mushrooms, and a number of the mushroom books, the common name they give for the Lacarias is deceivers.
Right.
Andy, could you repeat that word again? The common name is?
Deceiver.
Deceiver, okay.
It deceives you because it can be incredibly variable in color and form.
Right.
I would not call that a safe edible. Now, what do I have here? Whoops. Okay, this is an example of a Lactarius, and there's a bunch of these out right now. This one comes along later in the season. It's probably Lactarius luculentus, though there's some debate about that particular name. It's the orange milk cap, and it's probably a group of mushrooms that really need different names. But it has this, if you see there, this white milk right next to the stem. If you injure the gills on this one, this white sap or milk will come out. And that's the clue that it's a Lactarius. Nothing else is quite like that. There are two Lactariuses around here that are commonly eaten. One is Lactarius deliciosus, and the other is Lactarius rubrolacteus. This one we don't commonly eat. And if you taste it, it can be quite peppery.
This is the most common and abundant mushroom right at the moment in a number of Machosen parks. I was wandering around Blinkhorn Lake today, and it was everywhere. But that's what makes a mushroom a Lactarius, is if you break the gills, you'll get that milk or latex. And when you do so, the color of the milk or latex is important. Kem mentioned the delicious milk cap, which is deliciosus, which has orange latex, and the blood red Lactarius rubrolacteus, which has blood red latex coming from the gills when you break them.
This mushroom is another one that's out fairly late, and it's quite common. It's Leucopaxillus gentianus, and in our new book, we call this the pancake mushroom because it really does look like a pancake, and it can be about the size of a pancake when you're looking down from the top. But if you pick this one up and just take a bite out of the edge and nibble it and spit it out, you will spit it out very quickly because it is as bitter as a mushroom can be. And I'm doing this right now. And in fact, it's so bitter. If you do this, you should have a stick of gum with you because the taste will stay with you for an hour. And here down on the forest floor is the spirit gummy bear. It's a Pseudohypnum gelatinosum group. It's another jelly mushroom, and it's one that has spines like a hedgehog. So if you pick it up and look underneath, you can see the spines. And then if you sort of flick it, you'll see why it's a jelly mushroom. Again, this one is edible and tasteless. The name spirit gummy bear, by the way, is Andy's invention. Okay, so there's our quick tour through the Machosen woods this time of the year.
Well, you know, that was amazing that you did that, Kem. Thank you very much for wandering around with your camera, because I think it's encouraging to know how much you can find just wandering around the trails that many of us spend our time on in not, I don't think, a very long trip. But I'm also really, Kem said to me, it'll take us about 15 minutes to go through this video. When you get talking about mushrooms, it doesn't matter. It's beautiful. It was so great. I think I learned a ton, and I'm sure everybody else did too. So thank you so much for that. And I just wanted...
It actually works that way with mushroom field trips as well, Jackie. Yeah. My personal best is less than 100 meters in 3 hours.
Well, you know what I'm going to say, Annie, the very first time that I was on a myco blitz with you was when we went into off of not Laban, but Barrow. And there were about 30 of us. And you walked past the little gate, which doesn't allow vehicles, and you didn't get more than 10 meters from the gate. And everybody just kept bringing you all of these amazing fungi, and you were so encouraging. You were delighted with everyone that was found. And, you know, and the age range was great too. So that was wonderful. So folks, now's your chance to ask any questions that you have. So I think given our numbers, rather than doing it through the chat box, I think you should just, put your hand up just so I can, indicate different people, and then you unmute yourself and ask the question. That'll make it much more friendly. And I really want to welcome Ken and Arlene Boone from the Peace River Valley who've joined us tonight. So maybe they'll have a few things to say about northern mushrooms too. Nice to see you too. And I will welcome everybody else, of course. So yeah, anybody want to ask a question? Just jump in. I'm working on 2 screens here, so I may not be able to see everybody.
Hello, Ken and Arlene.
Mhm.
Yeah, hello everyone, and I might add, Jackie, I went walking out like Kim and Andy did today, but it's minus 24 out and snowing, and we didn't see any mushrooms. So.
All that mush, eh? Minus 24, wow. Whew. Well, maybe you need to be like the guy that, started in the north and moved all the way down, so you probably should be in sort of Central America right now. Okay, so questions.
I could do an identifying question.
Okay, Glenn has a question. Oh, and then we'll do Dorothy. Okay, so Glenn and then Dorothy.
Okay, so I want to share my screen then. We went out for a nice walk today to Mystical Beach. There's one. And saw this along the way, growing up the side of a fir tree. I guess it would have been a good idea to get a better picture of the underside.
Yeah, it's the underside we really need to see on this one.
Right. Oh, well, it was a beautiful mushroom.
How large was it?
That's, I don't know, about 3 centimeters, 4 centimeters across.
Did you look underneath yourself?
Just what I can see there.
Wow.
There are a few species of pleurotus, like pulmonarius, that sometimes look like this, that can appear as shelves, but can come out with kind of lateral stems from the side of a piece of wood and clump like that. Did you look underneath, Glenn? Did it look like it might be a white spored thing?
No, I really, the reason I took the picture was just because of how gorgeous it was looking. And wasn't thinking about trying to identify it later.
I'm wondering Glenn, if you can magnify the under piece of the top one.
As Kim was suggesting earlier, it's oftentimes difficult to identify mushrooms from photos, a lot more difficult than plants, but it's really helpful if we can see the underside of caps as well as the top of caps.
Okay, he's bringing in a little bit of the underside.
Okay.
Yeah, but maybe not clear enough.
Well, it's looking like the gills might be eccentric, which is to say not from the center of the cap, and perhaps slightly decurrent or running down the stems. So I'm not dissuaded from thinking that it might be something like one of the pleurotuses, Kim.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay, so shall we go to Dorothy, Glenn? Are you okay? Dorothy.
You're muted, Dorothy.
You're muted, Dorothy, yeah.
Okay, I just want to know, how do you share the screen? How do you put a picture up? Because I have a picture that I'd like you to have a look at.
Okay, so if you go down to the bottom of you're looking at this in gallery or whatever, your screen, and you take your mouse down at the bottom, you'll see an icon that says share screen. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to have your picture available. Have you got the picture available?
I would have to go to it. So you could maybe talk to someone else first, and I would I'll bring it up.
Right. Okay, so you want to put the picture on your desktop, and then you'll click on it on your desktop, and then you'll share screen.
Okay.
Okay.
So you could come back to me in a,
Okay, we'll
Yeah.
definitely come back. I see,
thank you.
yeah, Jan's got her hand up, and I'll click over just to the next screen to see if there's any hands that I'm missing, but go ahead, Jan.
I'm just wondering about the picking of them, because I feel when I've been out in the wilderness and I always think it's not good to pick flowers or something like that, because then you're destroying the potential of a plant that is still needing to grow. But it seems to be that you don't think of that when you're looking with mushrooms. So I'm just curious about that. And then, you know, how that relates to the whole health of the mushroom and the whole health of the ecosystem around them to pick them.
It's a concern a lot of people share, Jan, and it's something that people are more concerned about now, because I've never seen as many people out in the woods picking mushrooms as I've seen before. The analogy that people usually draw is to something like picking mushrooms is like picking apples from a tree. That is, if you don't damage the apple tree, you should be able to pick the apples and come back the next year and pick apples again. So that if you pick the mushrooms without digging up the forest floor too much, for example, you should be able to come back and pick the mushrooms again the next year. It's a good analogy because the mushrooms really are the fruiting bodies of the fungi. Most of the fungus is in the ground. So if you can pick the mushrooms without disturbing the soil too much, it should be a sustainable practice. The only study that I'm familiar with that looked at this over a longer period of time took place on the West Coast here in the United States with chanterelles that looked at plots over a number of years where they either pulled the chanterelles out, cut the chanterelles off, or didn't harvest the chanterelles at all. And they found over a number of years really no statistical difference between the plots. Mm. The thing that concerns me the most is I have been up around along the Nass River where people, this was a decade ago, were commercially harvesting pine mushrooms. The button stage, which oftentimes is barely poking its way out of the duff, is the most valuable. And there were some areas there that were raked, which would damage the actual mushroom filaments, the mycelium in the soil. And that's the kind of practice that could degrade the productivity over time. The other concern that people raise is that because these are the reproductive structures, if you remove all the reproductive structures, where will the spores come from for the next generation of mushrooms? But for a number of our mushroom species, at least, the spores are not the most important means of moving that fungus around, and B, an individual mushroom, well, some of the polypores, for example, produce hundreds of millions of spores a year. So you don't need to leave an awful lot of mushrooms behind to produce tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of spores.
The
Great question, Jan. Sorry, let Pam go ahead.
classic example of the spore producer is the Ganoderma applanatum, the artist conch, and over one season, it can produce 5 trillion spores. That's enough to go around the earth if they were laid side by side. So it's going to be very hard to interfere with their reproductive activity by picking them, but there's an aesthetic side to it. For example, it might be a good place to mention, some parks have no pick rules for mushrooms, and this is true of the CRD parks. So you should not pick mushrooms in Devonian, in Matheson Park. It's not allowed there, and part of the reason is just aesthetic, because if people are picking these and just throwing them on the ground, it isn't very nice for the next person who comes along. They can't enjoy them. So
Does that also apply to the Juan de Fuca Trail Park?
do you know, Andy? applies to
But
China.
yeah, I think almost certainly harvesting mushrooms would be forbidden there.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take it back
They
to
will,
Dorothy.
they will stop you there and warn you
Oh,
of
okay.
potential fining.
Thanks, Sinclair, for letting me
Okay,
know that. That's where we took.
Sounds like a personal experience, Sinclair.
No comment.
But that white mushroom that Glenn showed you, that was from the Wandafuka Park. So it's a good thing that Glenn didn't pick it. So
Yeah.
before we go to Dorothy, Andy, could you just, the question is, would like to know the name of the red mushroom in the first photo? It was the Christmas one, I think.
The Christmas
again.
Tuberia, Tuberia pudicea. We used to call it the Christmas Nicoria before we figured out what it was. It's one of BC's rarest mushrooms. And I only mention it because for me, it's a particular seasonal treat. If you're out and about hiking around, this doesn't apply to the boons, but if you're hiking around in the range of arbutus, and there are big old arbutus around with some rotten wood and or burnt wood around their base, have a look around the base and see if you can find these beautiful, beautiful mushrooms. And if you do, make a note of where they are, because they are, as far as we know, rare mushrooms, but they're uncommonly beautiful as well.
So either Andy or Kim, could you put that in the chat, the name in the chat?
Sure, I'll put that in.
That'd be great. Okay, Dorothy, over to you.
Okay, I'm going to try doing this. Can you see that?
Not yet. You have to.
What, okay, I clicked,
And then below your picture, Dorothy, there will be a button that says share.
On the bottom right-hand side.
okay, but now I don't have that screen anymore.
It's okay.
Hang
As long
on, oh,
you choose your picture, which should be on your desktop.
I did,
And then because you've already, you start by saying share screen, choose your picture, and then you should have a little button saying share on this screen.
oh, I see.
There you go.
Here we go. Here it's coming. Where did you see this one, Dorothy?
In my vegetable beds. I've got millions of them. And I tried to take a spore print and it doesn't look like it has one.
Just to look at this, what it looks like is a Ampulla Photosopes clavipes. Its common name is clubfoot, and it can be incredibly common. Last year, there were more clubfoots around than any other mushroom. This year, not so much. They tend to have a stem that widens a little bit as you go down, and if you reach down and pull up the whole stem on the bottom, you'll see that the bottom is attached to a white mycelium that's very thick. So thick, in fact, that when you pick it up, some of the soil comes along with it. If that's what it is, I'm not absolutely certain, but it looks a bit like that. What do you think, Andy?
I think that's a good bet. And I'm guessing it looks like you should be able to get a spore print from it, Dorothy, but I wonder if you got a white spore print from it and you took it on white paper.
Yes, that might have been
Yeah.
the case.
Why don't, if you have paper of any other color, why don't you try a spore print again and see if you get a white spore print? Or alternatively, if you get a white spore print on white paper, if you just tilt the piece of paper in the light, you should be able to see a white spore print on white paper.
Okay.
I often do spore prints on glass.
Oh,
You can put it against whatever background you want, and you can see it a lot easier.
oh, that's a great tip.
Okay.
Can you just tell me the name you thought it was again?
I'll type. Can you view the chat side over here? So you will be able to, in a moment. I'll type it in here.
Okay, thanks.
Ampulla Photosopes clavipes.
And you stop sharing your screen now.
Okay,
And it looks like Christina has a picture she would like to share
Yes,
as well.
it's been sitting there, but I don't seem to be able to download this. I'm double clicking to download it, but it's not coming up.
Well, perhaps Christina could
Oh,
open it. and
Glenn's got
share
it. Too. Can you share it, Glenn? Okay, I don't know why it's not downloading for me, but Glenn's right next to me. So we're working on this, Christina. And then after that, I have a little contest for you with a little prize. But we're going to try to do this one first.
Oh,
You did it. Whoa.
Oh, delicious.
Uh,
Looks like forest snot.
well, that is a mushroom in the process of becoming mush. And I think it's a particularly slimy mushroom as well, but it's also decomposing. And then the question is, what mushroom is it? It did, Christina, did this mushroom have a stem at all, or was the cap growing right out of the side of the wood?
She doesn't have audio, so she's typing this, I'm assuming.
Okay.
Out of the
Coming
wood, she's saying.
Right out of the wood. Okay. All right. And when did you take this photo, Christina? Was it recently, or like this week, or was it a while ago? Today in Nanaimo. Okay. So it's pleurotoid, which means it's like a pleurotus in that it's growing shelf-like out the side of a tree. It might, I don't know, I see some greenish coloration and orangish coloration. It might actually be a decomposing winter oyster or Sarcomixa, just based on the growth form, the slight sliminess, and the fact that it was taken today, and the fact that I'm seeing some of these colors in it. What do you think, Cam?
could be. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's just it's too far gone.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, then it's too far gone to say that it's not. But I think given the clues that it's in the mushroom guide, we define this the winter oyster as being a bittersweet arrival, because it's such a beautiful mushroom to find in the woods, but it appears so late in the season that it's almost always signaling the end of the season. So I'm guessing the fact that this is appearing so late in the season, I think if I'm not imagining it, I'm seeing a little bit of orange and green in there, and that it's growing out the side of a tree without a stem like that, that's the most likely mushroom that's on its last legs there.
Sinclair has a comment.
That's great. And I hope that everybody saw Steve's remark here. I'm guessing Christina will not disclose the exact location to avoid all of us running up there to collect this one for supper. The race is on. It was Nile Creek hike near Qualicum Bay. Okay, Sinclair, I have you. Yeah,
Well,
you're on.
I have a question. Do you know if it is still considered to be edible? I want to do a bit of research on this, but I was last week looking at a German book and it classified it as toxic. So I'm wondering if you have any up-to-date information.
The Sarcomixa,
Yeah,
and it classified it as what?
toxic, poisonous, non-edible.
I've heard this before. There have been books that have reported the Sarcomixa or Serotna as poisonous. Others don't. So I would say most of the books reported as edible, but not incredible.
I've eaten it. I suspect you've eaten it, Sinclair?
I've eaten it many times, but not anymore until I do more research.
Yeah, yeah, it's certainly not acutely toxic, but there are some mushrooms out there because I know lots of people who eat it. I don't particularly like it, but I know there's lots of people who do and who eat it. But there are some mushrooms out there that, like Paxillus involutus, that people seem to eat and eat and eat and then die. And nobody is quite sure why. When I grew up in Vancouver, and the Eastern Europeans used to descend on the boulevards in our neighborhood and eat the Paxillus involutus that was listed in all the books as poisonous. But that appears to be one that you can eat and enjoy right up to the point where you actually have a really horrible reaction that might kill you.
Sinclair, do you like it?
Yeah, I do like it, but what I generally do is I marinate it in oil and herbs for about half an hour before cooking it, and it doesn't taste bad at all.
You think you could achieve the same effect with cardboard?
That depends on the quality of the cardboard.
Yeah.
Okay.
You wash the slime.
I'm going to move on. The couple things. First of all, somebody, Hewitt, whoever NJ is, looks forward to purchasing the book, and I trust the way to donate is included in the email with the Zoom link. It is in the email, but if you scroll back to the beginning of this chat box, you'll be able to pick it up there, both the way to donate and to pre-order the book if you want to. So I'm just reminding everybody of that. And here's my little prize contest. So I have just finished 7 years on the board of Sierra Club BC, which has been a wonderful time working with them. But I've just gone off the board, and as a gift as I left, I was given this quite incredible book called Passion and Persistence, which is the history of 50 years of the Sierra Club in British Columbia, and it's quite an amazing history. And this is a beautiful, pristine cover. Well, the whole book, because I already had a copy of it. So I thought this is a great book to give as a gift. So this is a bit of a trick question, but I'm going to share a picture with you. And the first, well, actually not the first person, the person who identifies what this is and who's the youngest, so you have to put your name, your age in, so you can't be coy about your age, will win this. And just to give it also a little more context, I found this on it wasn't really even a trail. It was bushwhacking at Alert Bay, where I was camping for a couple of days. And I came across this and I thought, I do not know what this is. So what did I do? Of course, I took a picture with my trusty iPhone and I sent it to Andy MacKinnon. And within a couple of hours, I had my answer. So here we go. I'll share it with you. It's fairly small. I'd say, maybe a couple of centimeters. No, I do it in inches, a couple of inches across max. And yeah, it is a bit of a trick question. Isn't it beautiful?
Come on, Steve. You could be the youngest to get it right.
Okay, I can't see the chat box now, but people can say it too if they want. I'll stop sharing now. I think, did I stop sharing? Yes. Mm-hmm. So anybody making a guess?
Well, Bill Weir has put his age and guess in.
Oh my goodness, and Christine. Oh, and she's 27 and she got even more specific on it. Anybody else? Okay, Christina, you have it. But you were both right, of course. Andy immediately gets back and says it's a slime mold. It's actually not a fungi. And then he gave me the more, that's the species, is it? Stemonitis?
That's the genus.
Actifera. Anyway, I thought it was a glorious piece of architecture. Sasquatch. Oh, Joan, you have a new job ahead of you, naming new mushrooms.
Unfortunately, we don't have a good slime mold guide to, well, anywhere in North America, really. And certainly not to British Columbia. And we have lots of different species of slime mold in British Columbia, and probably 1,000 described species worldwide. And slime molds are not fungi. They're not, they are protists, actually. They're a different group entirely, and they have a really fascinating life cycle. It's just that the sort of people who go out in the woods and are paying attention to the mushrooms around them almost always encounter slime molds, which are fabulous, fascinating, and drop dead gorgeous. And a group that essentially nobody in this part of the world is studying. Pam Jansen, I guess, on Saturna Island would be doing more than anybody. There's no good reference work to them. And so there's a new career for someone. You could very quickly become BC's slime mold expert.
So it's a different kingdom, is that right, Andy?
Well, they're protists, wherever you choose to put protists. They're certainly not fungi.
Right.
The protists are really a garbage bag full of things that are unicellular or sort of multinucleate. A lot of the slime molds are multinucleate within one great huge cell. They can be they can be half an acre in size, creeping along under the forest floor, eating everything in their path as they travel. Smaller than about 5 microns or in size, and you don't notice them until they produce these magnificent fruiting bodies. But yeah,
Joan,
they're not fungi, but they're fabulous.
Joan mentioned I see a Sasquatch eyelash is the common name for it. I don't know if you made that up or not. That's very clever if you did. But one of the fun things that Andy and I got to do in writing this book is we wanted to put in a common name for all 350 of the mushrooms, right? But it turns out that they didn't all have common names. So we had to make some up. And,
Must have had fun.
yeah, that was a lot of fun. And one of them is called Hypsagus tessellatus, horrific name. And it grows on poplar trees. So Hypsagus on poplar trees. And Andy came up with the name Hip Hop. It's the hip hop mushroom.
Sorry about that.
Okay, a follow-up question on this. Christina is asking, and Christina, by the way, you get the book, so you have to give me your address, or you're in Nanaimo, but anyway, give me your address and I'll find a way to get it to you. And she's asking, is it an Axifera or a Fusca? Fusca, am I pronouncing it right?
And I just sent a note to Christina that I didn't actually even go so far as keying out the species of Stemonitis. I don't actually have good Stemonitis keys here. So I don't know. You'd have a better idea than I would, I think, if you've gone through the process of trying to key it out, Christina. If anyone on this call has a good slime mold key handy, please have a look and
Anybody
let's
else?
see if we can sort it out. And Christina also notes that she's seen a beautiful wolf's milk slime mold like Congala epidendron, which is one of our more common slime molds in Machosen. And it makes these sort of pinkish lumps that might be up to about a centimeter in diameter, sort of pinkish spheres, and you crush them with your finger, and they contain sometimes an almost safety pink slime inside.
Mm,
Just the most amazing thing you'll find in the woods that's not a fungus.
wow. Wow. Beautiful.
Yeah, so Christina, thank you for mentioning the wolf's milk in the Royal Roads University forest. Are you in love with the wolf's milk slime molds, the Lycogala? Are you as in love with them as I am? Come on, Christina, confess.
She says, haha, they're so cute.
Yes, there we go. Okay.
Here is one of the only references available on slime molds. Andy called this to my attention the other day. A companion has some beautiful art in it. And here is Stemonitis axifera. Right there.
Okay, so this, the one that you're seeing then is not an axifera.
It is. I think it is. Yeah.
It is?
It looks like the axifera, but there are other Stemonitis, and you'd be safer to just say it was Stemonitis species.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh, well, do we have any other questions? I have one final one that I don't know if may or may not be useful, which is I'm curious. I mean, you at the very beginning, Andy, you talked about how the season this year has been longer because we haven't had the frost that usually stops or turns everything into mush. And I'm curious about other factors that affect the degree to which we have a fruiting or not. Because I can't remember how many years ago now, but I think it was about 4 years ago. There was an incredible, it seemed to me like eruption of mushrooms everywhere, like going around Matheson Lake. It seemed to me like hundreds of different species that were very visible. And then another year, nothing like that. So I'm just kind of interested in the factors that come into play there.
Do you want me to take a stab at it, Kim, and then you can correct me, or would you prefer to do it the other way? A lot of it has to do with weather, and I should preface my remarks by saying that we don't know enough about it. What we do know is that in areas where people have been doing mushroom collections during autumn seasons for at least 26 years, they're still finding new mushrooms. And we found this in a small way in our mycoblitz. Whistler has found it the same too. So there are clearly mushrooms out there that don't fruit every year, that require very specific conditions, and probably some that don't fruit every decade. That's not true for most of the common ones, but some of them require very specific conditions. Certainly, because almost all of our large mushrooms that we see in the woods are growing associated with the roots of trees, they will only fruit if the trees have done well that year. So if the trees are stressed by extended summertime droughts or something like that, then you're not going to get a large fruiting of any of the large mushrooms in the autumn. A lot of the smaller mushrooms are much more dependent. They're decomposers. They're not as dependent upon the tree hosts, and they're more responding to the immediate climate in the autumn. And is it moist enough for the decay mushrooms to be able to decompose things? So they're probably more responsive to the weather from about August through October around here, a bit earlier on the West Coast. And then one other thing that appears to be clear is that it takes an awful lot of energy to make a mushroom. And we have never, in my experience, I'm not that old, so maybe it happens and I just haven't been around for it, but we never seem to get 2 fabulous years in a row.
Mm.
So if we have one fabulous fruiting season, the fungi seem to be suffering from sexual exhaustion, and you can get an okay season the next year, but I've never seen 2 fabulous fungal seasons in a row. And I think it has to do with the amount of energy and material that's required to make a mushroom out of microscopic threads. It's really I see some people are knitting during our seminar tonight. Making a mushroom out of these microscopic threads is really the most extraordinary example of knitting in the biological world. And it's not surprising to me that it takes a huge amount of energy, and maybe it's something you can't do extravagantly 2 years in a row.
Thanks,
It's,
Andy. Kim,
it's,
you're gonna-
it's late, it's late enough in the season. I think we're ready to call it. Okay. Was this a good year? It was good for quality. There were many different kinds of mushrooms. It was not good for quantity.
Mhm.
So here we go. For this year, on the scale of 1 to 10,
a 5.
it's a
Mhm.
5. That's the official call, by the way.
So to either of you on this, so given what Andy was saying though about the stresses on the trees, then can that mean that with global warming, especially the stresses on cedars and other trees, that we can expect there will be a weakening of the mushroom growing capacity, fruiting?
For the for if the trees are stressed, yes, but most of the large mushrooms that we see in the woods and most of the large mushrooms that people are interested in grow associated with the roots of trees, of conifers in the pine family.
Okay.
And so with the Douglas firs here in Metchosin, with the spruces, with the grand firs, the fungi that grow associated with the roots of western red cedar are generally have as their fruiting bodies fairly inconspicuous or underground fruiting bodies. And so although the cedars are probably suffering the most from climate change in this part of the world, that doesn't really affect the production of the large mushroom species that we're interested in all that much. Similar with arbutus, that have a different sort of association between the roots of the tree and the fungi. They don't play host to a lot of the large mushrooms, and especially not a lot of the large mushrooms that people are interested in. So although climate change is stressing our arbutus, especially on shallow soils, quite a lot, that's not affecting the production of large mushrooms on the forest floor, because there aren't a lot of them that associate with the roots of arbutus. When we start seeing that stress more in Douglas fir and grand fir, and when we see it actually where, out near Souk and beyond, where we start seeing the death of Sitka spruce, then I begin to get concerned, because Sitka spruce is an important host to a lot of large mushrooms, including a lot of our favorite edibles.
That what has been happening, as many of you know, is that species have been moving north in their native habitats, and there's a couple of species that are in Northern California and Oregon, and sometimes even in Washington, that aren't here yet. 2 of them that we're worried about. One of them is Amanita ochracea, which is deadly poisonous, hasn't made it here yet, as far as we know. And another one is Chlorophyllum molybdicase, which is the green spore chlorophyllum, and it could, with warming, make its way up here, and that would confuse our picture. There is, on the other hand, one very delicious edible called a candy cap, and Sinclair has eaten it. I've eaten it too in California, and we hope it makes its way up here, but it hasn't yet.
Yes, so with all things to do with climate change, there are changes that some things that might be welcome, but certainly there are great losses too. So I'm thinking,
I suspect if we see the candy cap up here, it will, you'll be able to trace it back to some place that Sinclair likes to hang out, would be my guess.
lovely. So I'm going to bring this to a close now, unless there's any other questions. I think not. This has been so delightful. I mean, we are so lucky to have you two in this community of ours, not just Metchosin, but the broader Victoria area. And I'm extremely excited about getting your book. So I want to remind everybody, if you go back to the beginning of the chat, that list, the link to pre-order the book is there. And please, if you haven't made a donation to the Metchosin Foundation, I think that this webinar is like really good motivation for doing so. And I was very impressed with what the foundation did with creating the way to do the iNaturalist. It's encouraged me because I don't need to know what it is I'm photographing. I just take the good photographs, hopefully, and then you guys can figure that out, or all of the other naturalists. Anyway, delightful, really delightful. And it's not just so much about learning, as it is also the depth of your knowledge and the passion with which you speak about it just helps us love these beautiful mushrooms and the trees that they're associated with even more. So thank you. I want to wish everybody a happy solstice. And I see Falconer, I don't know your first name, you got your hand up. So if anybody wants to, just jump in and say something now, go ahead.
Yes, the presentation, the slides that we saw and everything, are they going to be downloadable or available at some point?
Do you mean the ones from my presentation?
Yes.
Or did you mean that little movie that I showed?
Well, either one and both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could put the movie up if you want to look at it somewhere.
Our problem is that we don't have an actual list of the people who, because we didn't ask people to register for this.
Okay.
But I know where Rod is. I've got Rod's address, so I'll just send him
a link.
Yeah.
And Andy?
Unfortunately, I can't share mine right at the moment. I have permission from the photographers to use it for my presentation, but not to pass on. So I don't think I better share mine right at the moment, not without asking again.
Okay,
Sorry.
Jackie, you said at the beginning that you were going to record this event and make it viewable for people who couldn't make it?
Yes, so if that's okay, what I'll do, what you'll need to do though is you're going to need to send me your email, because I don't know. So I'm going to send it to everybody here. I'll send me your email if you want it, and once I get the copy, I'll just send the link to you. Does that work? Okay, all right. I'm just going to give you my email. Oh, there we go. Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to say?
Yes, here is I'm going to give you the video. I'm going to give you a Gmail, a Google Drive link that'll be valid for a few more days to that video. And if you click on that, you can view it.
Great, thanks for that, Kim.
I'll send it to you, Rod.
Mm-hmm. And thanks again, Ken and Arlene, for joining us. It was lovely to see your faces. And I'm sure lovely for you to be thinking about something else other than what's going on around your house with Site C. So happy solstice, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie, for organizing the.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Andy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm gonna wait till the very end before I stop the recording. Kisses to you, Arlene. So great to see you.